All right, Coast to Coast Combat Hour. Ed Carbajal here with Matthew Hawkins, as always, here to do a quick recap of the weekend's fights. We had two in one night, Matt. I don't know how you did it. I know it was rough for me looking at my phone and watching a pay-per-view in a bar.
I had two 60-inch big screens going in my living room, so I managed to pull it off. But probably not as much entertainment as you had at the bar. I know. By the
Oh,
end of UFC, you were at wit's end. It seemed like after so many Twitter posts.
oh yeah. I had a guy that there's a guy sitting next to me that looked like the BTK killer. Uh, and I forget what else happened. I mean, plus I was in New Jersey watching it, which is always interesting. So. Yeah, man, but it was definitely I mean, there were so many amazing things going on. I don't know, man. I did like the pacing of Bellator. I didn't like the even on the pay-per-view portion of the UFC, I didn't like that, but obviously a lot of interesting things happened on both cards. I don't know what piqued you or what did you find most interesting first?
Well, I mean, going into the weekend, I was actually way more interested in the Bellator card,
Mm.
considering you had a champ versus champ fight, the Patricio Pitbull and Michael Chandler, two of my current, top entertaining fighters to watch.
Yeah.
Across the board, really. And then also the welterweight tournament, Douglas Lima. I figured he'd go in, and I thought he would honestly take care of Michael Page pretty easily, but I thought it would be with wrestling. Uh, didn't turn out that way.
It's still pretty amazing finish though. I mean,
Oh, it was the knockout of the weekend. So anybody that
yeah,
didn't see it, Douglas Lima finished Michael Page, knocked him out cold 30 seconds or so into the second round. The first round was pretty uneventful. Lima Page was doing all right on the feet. Lima eventually got a takedown, which was kind of instigated a bit by Page, kind of getting in tight on him. Lima grabbed him, was able to get him down to the ground. But once they were down on the ground, Page used the handcuff hold and didn't allow Lima to even get a single strike off. Really, in the final 2.5 minutes of so of the first round. Third round came out obviously back on the feet, and Page landed a shot kind of the side of Lima's head, wobbled him a little bit, came in for the kill, and that's when Lima basically swept the leg and
yeah, man,
Hadouken uppercutted him. So he kicked the front leg out. Page went down to the ground, and as he was trying to scramble to get up, Lima timed a perfect uppercut right on the chin.
shut
Uh,
him off. It was
and
crazy.
turned him off. Yeah, like you
Yeah,
said. So I don't know. The guy I thought was going to win won.
yeah.
I believe I picked Lima to win the tournament prior to the start. I was leading him or Korshkov. I thought the winner of that fight would be the favorite going
Yeah.
through this. And unless Gracie has a tremendous performance against McDonald, I think Lima's got to be the favorite going into the final.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I actually see the final being between him and Gracie only because of McDonald's change in attitude or focus or whatever you want to call it. Who knows? He might turn it around, but in a few weeks because that's June 14th. So, but I don't know. I mean, coming off of a fight that soon, I think just that particular fight might favor the more well rested man, and Gracie I just see him advancing it against Lima at the end of this thing. But yeah, you had mentioned Pitbull and Chandler, man. That certainly that didn't go the way I expected it to go. I mean, I don't know about you. I thought the stoppage was early too. I
I
mean,
felt like he kind of got Max Hollowayed a little bit. Much like, or I'm sorry, not Max Holloway. T.J. Dillashaw, very similar, I thought, to a little bit of the his fight with Cejudo. Uh,
yeah,
I mean, not as much action. Cejudo actually landed a few more punches. It was hard to tell. I didn't think Chandler was out, but then there was a second on the ground where he basically looked like he was out, and I couldn't really find the punch that would have done it unless it was one of those ground strikes. Um, but I don't know. I always lean towards a couple extra punches. I've said it before when we're dealing with a fight of this magnitude, and
yeah,
I don't know. I thought Chandler would win the fight going in. Great win for Pitbull. Another 2 division champion. That seems to be the fad right now. And
Yeah.
I mean, it seems to me the smaller guys are winning all these championships, these dual championships. It makes me really wonder how important these weight classes are.
Yeah, I mean, I think as far as the stoppage goes, I mean Chandler was rising, is getting up. So I would have. I mean, he should have kind of let it go a little bit. I think. I think if he put him down again, but Chandler, I feel like just Chandler just gets he. It reminds me of when he fought here in New York against Primus, who that was a legit technique that he made. He nullified, with the calf kick, and he made his foot fall asleep and all that stuff. But like pulling the stool out from underneath him and all that other stuff that happened. I just feel like when Chandler gets these really big hyped up fights, something always happens to kind of jinx it. Like I see him if they do fight again because Chandler is such an animal. I mean, he's probably going to be gunning for that belt again anyway. I know his contract is still relatively new when he re-signed with them not that long ago. So I don't know. I definitely see them fighting again. I know Pitbull said he's not looking to do a rematch. He said he'd rather he fight his brother again. I have a feeling that's because of the featherweight tournament coming up. He's likely going to be in it, and so that'll probably keep him out of any fights with Chandler. But that's definitely a fight. We're going to see that again. I'm pretty sure we're going to see that again.
Yeah, no, I think so for sure too. And if Pitbull's going to enter the 16-man tournament, which is bound to take at least a year of action, I mean, most likely a year and a half, almost 2 years, probably to complete, then I think he has to either give the belt up. Perhaps he kind of holds it for ransom and says Chandler and his brother for the title. He can kind of use it as some leverage to get his brother his due title shot again. So that might be something where it would make sense. And then if Chandler were to beat his brother again, then it sets up a rematch with Patricio, and perhaps after the tournament. So I don't know.
How about he relinquished? When you say relinquish the title, you mean the 55 or the 45?
The 55, because I assume his belt will be on the line throughout the 45-pound tournament, much like McDonald's is right now. I mean, that would make the most sense to me.
Only reason I'm thinking if he stays at 55 and just relinquishes the 45, then it just makes the tournament that much more interesting. For every competitor that gets picked in it. I think they're going to announce those when they do their media stuff in New York too, like whoever's in it.
Yeah, I mean, if he's in the tournament, I think he keeps the belt. I don't think, but perhaps now he sees that he's got some fame and fortune, and he sits out, tries to defend the lightweight title, and then is there just to meet the winner of the tournament for the belt. I mean, that would work just as well. The winner of the featherweight tournament would get a title shot against him after he fights Chandler or whoever else could potentially be in line at lightweight.
What was your take on? I mean, since we're talking about it, I just figured I'd ask you because I know I texted you about it. What's your take on what they're doing with Jack Swagger / Jake Hager? These guys that are they're like 1-1. I mean, I feel like on one side I'm like, okay, on paper it makes sense because Jack Swagger is 2-0 now, but like on paper it makes sense. They're heavyweights. They're relatively new promotional pro fighters, so on paper it makes sense, but then you see all this comments and stuff when they have them standing next to each other, so I'm just kind of like I don't know how to feel about it.
Well, I'll tell you right now, I mean, you can get a 1-0 fighter or a 1-1 fighter that doesn't look like they haven't trained in 7 years. You know what I mean? I think I think the optics of it aren't necessarily great. I mean, both guys he's fought look like they basically came off the farm and haven't had any kind of real training. I mean, they're not in shape. I mean, I guess Jones lost like 60 pounds just to make weight for this fight. So
I think he hadn't fought since 2009 or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, in a sense for him, it's great. It forced him to lose a bunch of weight. Might save his life in the long run, but I just don't. I don't. I think that there's got to be other guys, and I don't know if you necessarily need to have somebody with no experience. It seems like there's plenty of old heavyweights that were on the Ultimate Fighter that you could bring in that have a little bit of name value, maybe have 10 fights, under their belt, but just, I know the UFC just had a heavyweight Ultimate Fighter not too long ago. And I mean, some of those guys, it seems like they would have more value and at least put him in there with somebody athletic. I mean, I know you picked Jones to win. I think it was more of a,
I did it to yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was more of a little bit of a rib on your part on some of your pro wrestling friends and stuff like that. But and I get it. I mean, it's one of those things. You don't know anything about him. You don't know if Hager can take a punch or not. We don't know.
I'll tell you this, because when I submitted my picks, in all honesty, I had full disclosure. When I submit my picks to on SureDog for that event, I actually just forgot to pick that fight. So one of the editors emailed me. He was like, "You didn't say anything for a Hager versus Jones," and I was like, "You know what? As punishment to myself, I'm just gonna pick Jones," and I picked him. But not for nothing, I don't mind rooting for the underdog. I mean, if he would have landed a lucky punch, if he had even got to that point, I would have been happy for him. I mean, the guy seemed happy to be there. That's one thing that I noticed. Both his opponents were super happy to just be, involved with all of that. So I think that's pretty cool for them that they're so happy about it. But I don't know. I like you said. I mean, the guy has been a in-ring athlete, for pro wrestling, and that's something you have to stay in shape for. So it's not like, I don't know. I think when guys transition from pro wrestling, you have to take into account that they are always active physically, and regardless of their skill set in martial arts, they definitely have a high tolerance for pain.
Yeah,
So,
I mean, and he's a former All-American wrestler and stuff like that. We're not talking about, this isn't CM Punk per se, who maybe did Taekwondo on the weekends for 4 years or something like that. We're talking about, a guy who wrestled at a high level and has been in shape and competing in, albeit a predetermined matches, still some form of athletic competition for the previous 15, 20 years. And I don't know. I just think it's the optics. I don't think it's the records of the guys he's fighting. I just think that they're picking guys. It's like, I mean, if he said he was 325 when they called him, what list are you going off of where his name comes up? You know what I mean? That would be my thing. Is like, where's your pool of fighters? Who's Richard Chow or Rich Chow? Who's he calling and who's he? I don't know. I mean, obviously, I don't know. That's where my question would rise. I get that they're happy to be there. I mean, if you're that guy and you're going to get paid some money, you get to be on TV, you get a chance at some glory, and you're fighting a guy who's probably, I mean, he could hurt you. Don't get me wrong, but he hasn't gone out there and, he doesn't lead me to believe that he's going to go out there and just maul somebody at this point. I mean, he's taking people down, submitting them, doing what he should do. But I feel like it's time for him now. He's got to have to fight somebody with a little bit of athleticism and a little bit of, he's got to fight somebody he's not 1,000, minus 1,000 favorite over. I think we got to get a little bit of competition. And I don't know. I don't know who that man is.
Are you just exaggerating, or are those the actual odds now? Right?
I mean, I'm not sure, but it's got to be at least that. I'd say he's at least a 10-1 favorite. I mean, I don't know. Maybe not quite that much. Maybe everybody thought there's a puncher's chance, but I mean, I don't think anybody really truly thought that Hager would lose that fight. I don't think Bellator did. I don't think Bellator would put him in there with the fight where they think
I was just that, like I said, I was punishing myself, and you're obviously, I mean, because I texted you, I was right about, I was taking a shot at Jeff and Danny and all you pro wrestling herbs. So
no, I mean, I get it. I even kind of laughed and thought about, it was the fun champ because he had a little bit of charisma and he was the talk of the internet for a day or so after the weigh-in. So there was that. So there was that fight. So he wins. Hager wins first round. Arm triangle, second arm triangle win in his 2 bouts.
Nice setup too. I mean, I don't know if you saw that breakdown with Robin Black. That was pretty good. He's got a nice little detail where he tilts the opponent to the side using his own big ass hands. If you haven't seen that, check that out on Robin Black's Twitter feed. It's a pretty nice.
I haven't seen that. But he had a nice transition into it, and I I don't know. I just think it's time for a little step up in competition. He's not young, so I don't know. I mean, it gets to the point now where I'd like to see how he would do against somebody like, I don't know. He's
Matthew Hawkins? No.
I could go in there and not land a punch and get submitted, just like two opponents.
Yeah.
But I don't know. We'll see. But another win for him, and he obviously got the crowd against him, so he's kind of got that villain going for him right now that could potentially work and help draw some eyes to his fights.
Mm-hmm.
The other fight of notes on the main card, AJ McKee, I'm sorry, the son of Antonio McKee, stays perfect, beats Pat Curran in really his biggest step up to date. Curran hasn't competed in a couple years. Not the most exciting fight in the world, but McKee moves to 14-0, and really is well in line now for a title shot against Pitbull. If Pitbull does something prior to the tournament, maybe even that. I don't know if they make that your first round matchup, but maybe you do. You did Koreshkov and Lima in the other one. Maybe you do Pitbull and McKee and get that and that way if McKee wins, Pitbull frees back up and then he's got available for a fight with Champ a few months down.
They certainly stirred it up enough if you watch all the media, like the press conference and stuff. So that's definitely a fight to make and soon.
Yeah, I mean, I always feel like you need to strike when it's hot because you never know when somebody's going to blow a knee out in training or, if guys are healthy and able to fight. I feel like it's time to, it's always best to just sign these fights and, especially at a time now when viewership and stuff's in question for the UFC and, build your stars. And right now, I mean, I thought Chandler would win the fight, and I thought we'd be talking about him being one of the great pound-for-pound fighters that are current. But really, I mean, Patricio Pitbull is as big of as good of a fighter as anybody else in this world right now.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he truly is. He's 29-4, avenged all of his losses but one, which I think was a split decision to somebody I can't recall off the top of my head, but So I don't know. That was the Bellator card, and then simultaneously. Down in Brazil, we had the UFC card going. Not the most loaded card of all time, but
no. But before we get into that, just one final thing about obviously MMA communities had Taiwan Claxton do a Q&A, and he also won this past weekend, and there's a highlight of him floating around and him talking to 50 Cent in the middle of his fight from the cage side. So congrats to Taiwan Claxton. Maybe we'll try and get him on here in the future. Obviously, he's a fan of the MMAcommunity.com. So, but yeah, man, I feel like I almost what you just said about the UFC. I almost didn't go out to the bar. I thought about staying home just to watch Bellator.
Yeah, I mean, the UFC card had some name value. If you're a hardcore fan, it's hard to miss any kind of. I'm sorry, the NBA draft's got their lottery going right now, and that's catching in the corner of my the Lakers just moved to the top 4 spots, which is big for me. But yeah, I mean, if you're a hardcore fan, the Anderson Silva and Aldo on a card, you're not going to miss that. Even at this time in there.
Yeah.
And as it turns out, I mean, in a card with BJ Penn and little Nogueira, I mean, it was everything that a hardcore fight fan would want. Unfortunately, the results didn't exactly go well.
Yeah. We got old school names, but we didn't get the old school results. That's for damn
sure. On the prelims, BJ Penn took another loss in a row, his 7th loss in a row, setting an all-time UFC record for most losses in a row.
That guy just needs to stop.
For a sure Hall of Famer and one of the at one time. I mean, I always believe that your legacy is built at your peak and not on your downfall. So for me, he's always going to be an all-time great and arguably a top. He's a top 3 all-time lightweight in the history. Well, I mean, we're getting some good guys going right now. So I mean, he's always going to be a top 10 great light heavyweight. And for the first 20 years of the sport, he was the greatest. Now you got guys like Khabib and Cowboy and. I mean, a bunch of other guys starting to make names for himself, but until guys win multiple championships and defend them, then pins right there. So,
yeah, man. I mean, obviously he's got a lot of stuff going on, I know we don't like to talk about stuff like that on this podcast because we're just about the fights and the athletes and maybe a little bit we'll complain as fans about the rising costs of being a fan of the sport, but like with everything he's got going on in his personal life, and the UFC's already got some questionable folks on their roster that controversial figures. The legacy he has was good enough that I think he should just step away, man. I mean, Luke Thomas was saying something on his on the MMA Hour yesterday, where like the folks around him they're not helping him because he called them all complicit in adding to the ass whoopings he's catching. He did a good first round though. I mean, he had a good.
Yeah, I don't look at it as that dramatic. I think we're talking about a guy who's probably looking to try to get a win on his way out the door. And the competitive, when you have guys that are this competitive, I don't really blame him for that.
Yeah.
I think the bottom line is that if anything, the UFC is probably doing him wrong. The UFC should have probably let him go 3 or 4 fights ago and then go to a Bellator or go to a Ryzen or go somewhere else and get that final win. Maybe he didn't want that. But there's really not many guys on the lightweight roster short of them finding a Tombstone Thomas or whatever to come into the lightweight division, and that wouldn't do him any good either at this point. So I don't know. It's a really tough situation, and it really highlights the end of the career for most of these guys in MMA. It doesn't end well. It usually doesn't end well. He's not getting KO'd brutally, which is nice. It's not the Chuck Liddell finish. It's not the Rich Franklin finish. It's the BJ Penn finish, and the BJ Penn finish, unfortunately, is just losing a ton of decisions over the last 10 years in a row. So I don't know. It's a shame that a lot of people will never truly appreciate what he did in the past. Luckily, there is Fight Pass and YouTube, and anybody who's a true fan of the sport can still go back and watch his great performances. And I'm happy I got to see him in his prime, and always be one of the guys that you bought tickets to go watch. So that was on the prelims. He lost a decision to Clay Guida, 29-28 basically. I think one judge gave it 30-27. So that was legend number 1 going down. Antônio, Little Nogueira. He suffered another loss. Hasn't been quite the pin loss record, but I think he's 2-4 in his last 6 now, and unfortunately, he's the other way. He's getting brutally knocked out between Rumble Johnson, and this time was Ryan Spann, who's a young up and coming fighter, but not somebody that historically you would have disposed of a Nogueira brother the way he did. So that was a little bit disturbing. And then the main card, I mean, even Thiago Alves, another guy who's been around, his luck's not very good, and he suffered another loss on his way up, and then we get to the big names, and
and that was one that I thought he could have won, only because I was worried about obviously the age difference and the record of
Laureano Staropoli.
Staropoli, yeah. Staropoli. I was gonna say the Argentinian guy. He came in. Obviously, I thought I looked at who he fought, and I'm like, all right. I thought experience would have been the leader in that fight, and Thiago Alves could have pulled it off. But man, like you said, I mean, none of these. I'm not. I think I said it on Twitter. I'm not betting any more cards in Brazil.
No, I mean well, this was a rare one. Usually, it's the Brazilians who sweep the card, and Brazilians had trouble in this one. Like I said, from that, I mean, you had Nogueira go down, then that was followed. Betch Correa went down to Aria Aldana by a nice armbar finish. Yeah, Aldana's really a rising star in the female 135-pound division. But then we get to the middle of the main card, and Alexander Volkanovski and José Aldo. We didn't do predictions for this show. I was kind of leaning towards Volkanovski, just thinking that, at some point the new guard's got to take over, and he really did. He came in, shut down José Aldo, he won a unanimous decision.
Yeah.
Aldo didn't look like the Aldo that we saw against Stevens and some of the
Yeah.
other guys, but
And you thought that would have happened in Brazil, like you said. I mean, about especially when the Brazilian fighters get to fight in Brazil. I actually had him picked to win for that reason, but man, whew,
yeah, I mean
yeah,
Volkanovski's a badass. We found out
yeah,
yesterday that Max Holloway is actually going to fight Frankie Edgar at UFC 240 at the end of July, which is a little bit not so much surprising, but with the win for Volkanovski, I would have thought that he would have possibly slipped into that spot. But I guess he had some health issues getting out of Brazil.
yeah. He had a blood infection of all things, which is weird.
Yeah, so I mean, I don't know how exactly that works. Sorry,
Yeah, I
Lakers.
don't know.
Lakers got the 4th pick. Knicks got the 3rd pick. So
I don't
um,
know. I don't know how long it takes to cure or get a fight off a blood infection, but yeah, man. I mean, better he you want a strong Volkanovski fighting any of those guys. So yeah,
yeah, I mean, yeah. So, and I don't think it really kills him that much. I mean, he that fight will happen in July, and he'll be ready for the winter come October, November, which puts him right in line for possibly Madison Square Garden, which I believe is going to be November 2nd this year
hmm
for UFC. I think it's
yeah,
244. If that goes down, it puts him right on schedule for that or their end of the year big event. So it's something that he can look forward to and train and really get ready for Max. And it doesn't hurt to have the champion have to fight another fight and get a little bit more wear and tear on him if you want to become the champion. So but yeah, Aldo didn't look great. Volkanovski unanimous decision, and the next contender now at 145 co-main event, Jared Cannonier, Anderson Silva.
oh man, that was hard to
Fight that
watch.
didn't make much sense for me from the start. Don't understand really the whole theory behind even having Silva take this fight. It doesn't.
44 years old too. Like I don't get. I mean,
I mean, I get why he's trying to fight. I mean, he's looked fair in his fights. I still hold to the fact that Adesanya didn't want to
yeah,
do this to him. The fans that didn't see the highlights, Cannonier landed basically brutalized him for the first 4.5 minutes of the first round. Not brutalized him, but was controlling the fight. Landed some good leg kicks, and then he finally landed a inside leg kick on Silva's right leg, right at the knee, and it seemed to do some serious damage to Silva, who obviously has had leg issues in the past in his
yeah.
fights.
And he said that his leg was bothering him during the camp, which is kind of like, I mean, if you're having knee issues at this point in the game, at that age, I mean, then maybe you need to start rethinking. And they're in the process of renegotiating him for more fights too, from what I read that week of fight week for that, which
Well,
I hope this changed the tune of that.
I doubt it because that's the UFC. I don't think is signing guys to have them fight. I think it's signing guys to keep them from going to Bellator.
Yeah,
And I mean, we can talk about it as much as you want, but if Anderson Silva went to Bellator and put on 30 pounds and decided to fight Fedor, again, you get it. There's certain fights that could be made that would be big news across the board, and I think that's why the UFC is signing these guys to 10 fight contracts when they're 40 years old. And maybe they want to give Silva one final payday and lock him in for some money if he ever decides to fight. But I don't see him coming back from this, and I feel like it was a wasted fight on him, especially when you got Cannonier talking about how he's going to leg kick him, or low kick him, and Silva's talking about having an injured knee. But I mean, unless it was dramatic, which I have no reason to believe Silva would be, in that case, his knee seemed like it took some serious damage. Even in the replays, it looked like there was a little bit of a stress or separation almost going on in the knee. So I don't know. But I mean, that puts you a year and a half away in rehabilitation and surgery. And that puts you at 45, 46 years old. I don't know. I just wish they would have, I don't know who to give him. I can't even think of names off the top of my head. I
yeah,
mean, hell, I would have rather them brought back Rich Franklin. You know what I mean? And something
yeah.
like, but, or I don't know. Sign Tito Ortiz to a 1-fight contract. Have fight Tito Ortiz at 205. Something
Hey,
like that
Tito
makes
Ortiz
more
is
sense.
busy in Combate Americas. What are you
Yeah.
talking about?
Hey, good for
Didn't
Tito,
you
man.
see the signing on Amy's Instagram or wherever the hell it was?
I saw some of that stuff. And
Yeah.
good for Tito, man. If Tito's getting paid and now he's going to get paid to go whoop up Dos Caras Jr. and a pro wrestler, I mean, that's what's going to happen. So good for him. 40. I think he's also 44, and he's actually winning some fights, which, like I said, great for him, man. If he's able to make money and not suffer any damage and beat up guys like Chael Sonnen and Chuck Liddell and Dos Caras Jr., then I mean, he's genius, really. Who knows what Combate's paired him? They're obviously probably overpaying him. If they were able to outbid anybody else who might be in the interest of him. Obviously, that means probably Golden Boy was one and done, which is not really a surprise.
I know he did that right in front of Oscar De La Hoya too, which was crazy because De La Hoya was sitting next to him and he signed a contract with somebody else. I wonder if Campbell took that contract and went like that to him or something.
Well, yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't know what the deal was with De La Hoya. We obviously he I don't, it didn't make a lot of sense him to get even into MMA the way he did it. So then that brings us to
he handled that wrong. But go ahead.
Yeah,
no, I'm sorry.
From start to finish, promotion, fights, everything he did in that fight.
Media, because they never responded to when I reached out to them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and then that brings us to the main event. Rose Namajunas trying to defend her strawweight title for the second time against Jessica Andrade. We didn't do predictions. I was going to pick Andrade to win. I thought she would storm her and kind of outmuscle her. I didn't think that she'd pick her up and drop her on her head and KO her. But that's what happened.
I mean, I saw her. I picked her to win, and both when I submitted my picks to Sherdog and for MMAnews.com, and in the MMAnews.com they let me include details, and one of them was her strength, and I mean that obviously was a factor. That was the only factor, but that was kind of the only thing she had. I mean, I wouldn't mind seeing that fight again, only because outside of that little interaction of her getting lifted, because it happened twice. The first time she lifted her, it turned into 2 submission attempts, the triangle and the armbar that she managed to squirm out of. But Rose had her otherwise. Technically, as far as their skill versus skill went, Rose was winning. So it looks like the brute strength was the major factor for Andrade to get the KO the way she got it. But did you see that video of her supposedly tapping in the first lift? I don't think that's a tap.
No, not at all. No, there was no reason to tap. And I don't know. Rose looked great for the first round. She looked. I mean, her first round was probably the best. I was shocked at how good her striking was, what she was doing, how she was moving. I was thinking that I thought she was going to finish Andrade. 30 seconds into the fight, the way it started. But I don't know. I'm not so sure if this might not be a case where it's just somebody having somebody else's number. I feel like first of all, I feel like Namajunas going into this fight accepted those slams way too. She was going for the Kimura lock, and did you get a chance to hear any of the broadcast?
No, they don't play the audio in Buffalo Wild Wings because they're jerks.
So it was actually pretty funny because it was basically 5 minutes of Dominic Cruz telling us that as long as she goes for the Kimura attempt, Andrade can't pick her up and slam her.
Yeah, well.
Over and over again, over and over again, over and over again, even to the point where she's picking her up, and she goes, "Oh, well, she's got the Kimura, she can't slam her," and then 1 second later, she's unconscious on the ground. Yeah. So it was actually pretty hilarious. Kind of it's kind of the lecture that some of the guys give people, and you're kind of going, well, I just watched her pick her up and almost throw on her head the first time. Anybody who's watched this sport knows that you can't get slammed on your head multiple times. Eventually, it's going to catch up to you. Yeah. She was either going to get armbarred or she was going to get knocked out with a slam. If you're going to, if that's
or worse, have vertebrae damage or something.
I mean,
like that.
Initially, I thought it was bad. She kind of was. She was out and she was flat, and You know,
Mhm.
so that we have the new champion. I've seen a lot of outcry on social media about trying to ban slams and stuff. It
Come
drives me
on.
cra- It drives me
Yeah.
crazy. It
That
absolutely drives me crazy when
getting slammed in the cage is almost as old as MMA itself.
it drives me crazy every
Yeah.
time something, and it only is because it was Rose. Everybody loves Rose, and it was the poor little girl getting dropped on her head, and that's just how it is. If the roles were reversed, people would have been talking about how they would have been calling Rose Rampage Namajunas. I mean, that's what it would have been,
Yeah.
and I just don't want to see this. It's amazing seeing like major players in the media
Yeah,
game.
that people
Uh,
had to cite the unified rules to show that that was actually legal, and I mean it's fighting, for Christ's sakes.
Well, I mean, you had fighters that didn't know the
Yeah.
rules, and I know that there's NFL players who don't understand the overtime rules. I mean, I get that there's a little bit of that, but the fact that people don't understand the rules. I mean, I can't think of another sport where the fans have no idea what's going on half the time. And I hate to bash MMA fans, but they really don't. They don't know the rules on half of the stuff, and
People
it's a
calling
little.
darts anacondas and vice versa.
Yeah, I mean that's the technical,
Yeah,
that's the
yeah,
names and stuff. I'm talking about people who don't understand the kneeing rules, or don't understand the up kick rule, or don't understand the
Stick
slam rule.
off.
And I get there's some confusing rules and stuff, but for the basic part, you can't soccer kick somebody on the ground, and you just can't. When they say spike somebody, basically it means pal drive them. Do what Bob Sapp did to Big Nogueira. You can't
Yeah,
do that. You can't pick somebody up between your legs and drop, people, Mr. Wonderful Paul Orndorff, and drop a pile driver on him.
yeah.
Other than that, you can pick somebody up, and if they're trying to break your arm, you can do whatever you want to do to stop them from breaking your arm.
And
And
and uh, the thing is about slams in general. I mean, I remember drilling getting slammed years ago. It was actually at Dan Miragliotta's academy in Elizabeth, New Jersey, the one he had before he was a ref. His grappling instructor was Eddie Rolón, who fought some pro MMA back in the day, and he taught the class. And they were teaching it was because of Rampage's slam over Ricardo Arona. And one of the things, I mean, the thing is with when you're trying to be smart about it, the best defense against it is actually, if you watch Sakuraba and Rampage Jackson, you go limp noodle, because then the slam it just turns into you kind of hulking out, and there's a loose dude on you, or your loose opponent on you, so no damage is taken and you can still continue your grapple or whatever. It's when you hold on tight that it turns into this 50-50, like a coin toss. Either you're gonna someone's gonna get knocked out, or I'm going to get submitted somehow. Mike Kimball in his last fight, same thing happened. He was getting in. It was a triangle or arm. It was a triangle, I believe, and he picked the guy up and slammed him. The guy didn't let go, and Mike Kimball tapped. But now Mike Kimball's fighting in June, and that guy's sitting with 3 vertebrae in his neck broken.
yeah.
So it really is a coin toss. But I mean, I think the safest bet is always to just do the Sakuraba thing and go let go or go limp noodle, because then you get to fight another day and you don't have to have any of this conversation.
Yeah, I mean, it was just, it was spectacular, and it was one of the highlight knockouts of the year. But yeah, you just can't accept being picked up and slammed on your head and thinking you're gonna pull off a miraculous armbar. That's
Yeah.
not a strategy in defending the
No.
slam. But I don't know. I don't know if it's something that Rose will ever be able to stop per se. She's, I don't know if her build or anything is gonna, stop her from not being able to be picked up by a much stronger, more compact fighter like Andrade. So I don't know. And then we kind of got her speech afterwards, which is very Rory-esque, talking about not really wanting to fight and
Yeah,
wishing she
getting a
was on a
farm,
farm and
yeah.
all that stuff. So I don't know if that's just it's not nonsense. It might be what she truly believes, but if that's the case, the UFC needs to not put her back in the cage anytime soon. I don't think you can have that mentality and go in there and it just doesn't make a lot of sense. If that's really what she's thinking mentally, then I think it would be a crime for the UFC to put her in there and let her suffer potentially a life-altering fight. But yeah, she looked great up until the point of the slam. So we'll see if she all of a sudden gets home and decides that a rematch is what she wants, or if she paves the way for possibly Suarez or Michelle Watterson or the next contender there. So, but a really exciting weekend. I mean, everything kind of ended with a bang. Obviously the knockouts of the night where it was Andrade Slam and then the Lima knockout in Bellator. No Bellator this week. I don't think we have any Bellator until your card out there in New York on the 14th of June. But there is another one of your favorite UFC on whatever plus minus divided by the streaming service that I don't think anybody's really watching, but they're telling us a lot of people are.
Rochester. Yeah.
And speaking of that, did you see the numbers? I was seeing projections of under 50,000 before this
for this last one.
I was seeing Meltzer. Somebody was predicting around 50,000 or less based off of the numbers, because they're saying that the other event did somewhere in the neighborhood of 100, maybe even a little less.
Yeah. And I did. Yeah.
I think the social media and everything was leading to this one maybe being only around. But I don't know. I thought the UFC promoted it terribly. I didn't see any promotions with Aldo or Anderson Silva.
I was just gonna say that. Yeah.
Everything was just the girls, and I mean, obviously they can carry a card. It's a great fight. They have every right to be the headliner, but I thought that the fact that I didn't see Anderson Silva's face at all on Sports Center or ESPN on the banners or anything like that, I thought was shocking.
It was shocking. What's funny is because I train Saturday morning, so we always talk if there's big fights on Saturday night. We always talk about them. And when I told my training partners that follow this sport, BJJ takedowns, the Rolling with Simon, a couple of guys that fight pro and amateur, and I said, yeah, and Anderson Silva's on this card. They looked at me like they were like, when was that announced? And I was like, never. But he's on the card.
He's fighting.
Yeah. So you're right about that, man. It's horrible. I don't know what they're doing over there, but they got to stop it.
I think ESPN's going to lose a ton of money in the long run. This might, I think they'd make more money just putting it on regular ESPN. Honestly.
Oh yeah.
I think that they would get huge viewership and sponsorship money. At this point, they've already paid the UFC, so they're not recouping their money right now. I believe
but they're not stopping. I mean, if you looked at their schedule for I think third and fourth quarter, it's the same. I think I probably saw maybe 3 or 4 ESPN red cards. Everything else is on plus or pay-per-view. So they're not stopping. They're going all in this in 2019. So
well, I mean, even if they just moved everything to plus, it would be a plus. I think the pay-per-view is what's killing them. I don't think that that does them any favors. I just don't. I don't think they're selling it. I think they're paying the UFC on average of somewhere around 400,000 buys per show is based off the average. So I mean, if that's the case, they're already in the red. 350,000 buys on their first 2 shows, and that can't be good. And I think my numbers are way off there. I think it's more like 700,000. So I mean, obviously things can change if the first quarter or the first, I don't know how they do their finances. I'm no expert on that, but I imagine they're going to sit around a table one day and go, hey, we just lost $1 billion. And I can't, that's going to have to be an interesting conversation they have. So I don't know. But with that said, there's a fight card this weekend, Rochester,
New York.
Not a huge card, but the main event does have a little interest to it. Rafael Dos Anjos, Kevin Lee is the main event. 5 rounds at lightweight. Or actually, no, it's 170. I'm sorry, this is a welterweight fight. Kevin Lee's coming up.
Yeah.
I always like Dos Anjos. I feel like he takes terrible matchups. I think he does himself no favor by fighting wrestler after wrestler after wrestler, from Covington to Usman, and it just seems like he's always in there with somebody who's trying to grab him and hang on to him. And I kind of feel like the same thing might happen here with Kevin Lee. And I'm going to take Kevin Lee by decision, 5 rounds. A lot of wrestling is what I think is going to happen.
I'm with you on that one. I always when I look at Kevin Lee now, I always look at his fight with Ferguson. I know he lost, but that was such a great fight, and the way he just the way he his persistence and no quit attitude. I I think Dos Anjos now has trouble with guys with that type of pressure and motivation, and Kevin Lee. I mean, he's definitely a go getter. So I'm with you on that one.
Yeah, I mean, and he's coming off a loss to Raging Ally Akenta by decision in a fight he was beat up pretty good in.
Mm-hmm.
It's a must win, really. I mean, if you're going to stay relative, he is coming up to welterweight, so he's leaving the lightweight division, but. I feel like it's more important win for him at this point. I mean, it obviously Dos Anjos. I think we've seen the best of him.
Yeah.
I don't think he's going to be a world champion again.
Did you? I don't know if you heard Kevin Lee. He was on Chael Sonnen's podcast, and he said that unofficially he was going to try. We'll see on when they do the weigh-ins, but he was going to try to he was going to try to reach out to RDA and get him to agree to both of them trying to make 165 the day of the weigh-ins to try to argue for the 165-pound division. So I hope they can do it. I don't know if regulatory. This is something John could answer if he was on, but I don't know if the regulatory athletic commission would let that go. Maybe because they're the same weight, but we'll see. I guess we'll have to see on Friday.
Yeah, no, I think that would be fine. I think you can because the weight division technically is 156 to 170. So as long as you're in that range, a lot of times they're not going to have somebody weighing at like 159. But there was a bout. I think there was a female bout where somebody was about 4 or 5 pounds lighter this past weekend.
Oh yeah, the Beth Correa was like 8 pounds over, wasn't she?
Well, she was over, but I mean that's usually something sloppy or some screw up. I'm talking about a light where a person takes a last minute fight and they come in and they're not they're from a division lower or something.
Oh yeah, they do like the catch weight stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, so I don't think there's a problem. I mean, if somebody weighed in at 170 and somebody weighed in at 160, maybe they would wonder what's going on. But if they both came in at 165, I think there shouldn't be any issue at all. It's the weight division is a group of pounds, so I think it'd be fine. So. I don't know, but that's what we got going on. I'm trying to think if anything else. I believe there's a 1 card. I think Shinya Aoki fights again this weekend. Defensive belt.
Yeah, there's a couple of fights I know. Just the other fights on Rochester. Megan Anderson versus Felicia Spencer. They're both former Invicta FC featherweight champions, and they technically never lost a belt, so they'll be fighting each other on this card. So it's kind of like an Invicta champ versus Invicta champ unofficially. If you're if you're a fan, if you're an Invicta fan, it should be interesting to watch. And then that Desmond Green is on the card, and he's fighting Charles Jourdain. And that's the fight that's his hometown. So he said he wanted to fight just to put him on the card. He'd fight anybody, and this is the fight.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at the card. It looks to me like. Honestly, a couple of the prelims are actually the interesting fights. Female fight Aspen Ladd 7-0. I know she's had some issues getting fights. She fights Sajara Eubanks, who obviously has had issues making weight and cost herself some title shots and so on. But that's really a huge fight in that it is at 135. So Eubanks is coming up. She's not going to try to make 125. So we'll see how her strength and everything pays off there. Ladd's fought at 145 in the past. I think Ladd, we're going to find out how serious she is too. Mm-hmm. I know she was initially scheduled to fight Holly Holm before Holm ended up getting moved into the title shot with.
Oh yeah, that's right. I forgot about that.
Nunes. So obviously the UFC thinks something of her, and I saw her fight several times in Invicta, and she was always impressive. So that'll be an interesting fight. Did you watch the submission grappling event?
On the Submission Underground?
Yes.
Oh yeah, that was amazing.
Yeah, see, I didn't catch that. But I did see. No, did they say something? I think it was after the Jake Shields interview about them coming out to UFC Fight Week.
They Chael Sonnen mentioned July 6th. Like he hinted at it. He didn't say anything like outright, but I mean, there's usually a few things going on that week. And I know that one of the if they do, I think the main event might be Fabiano Scherner versus Gabriel Gonzaga, because that was something that Scherner said he wanted. But I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if they come out that week. I mean, Chael, that's Chael's promotion. He has to be out there ESPN. So if he doesn't get blazed by Machida in June. I mean, I'm sure we'll get more details about that. But when he mentioned it, that people started talking about it on social media, he dropped a hint, like almost kind of like he mentioned July 6th. And Gilbert Melendez said his fights, all the one that Nolan King announced it, but Gilbert Melendez said he's signing his contract that night to fight Arnold Allen on the UFC card. So there's definitely people from Shug Submission Underground are going to be around all that. So I wouldn't be surprised if that's added to International Fight Week. But they advertise it so poorly and it's been sucking so bad. They need to put something else on there and not just one pay-per-view.
Well, yeah, I mean, obviously, Submission Underground's on Fight Pass now, so there's obviously a partnership there. I was just curious because I was trying to figure out what day it would be, because I know the 6th would be odd because that's the event day. That's UFC 239. So unless you're gonna do something in the morning, but I mean that's drawing fans out for 12 hours of combat, and sure I'll be there, but a lot of people won't. Sunday seems like a bad day to do it because a lot of people are gonna plan on leaving town.
Home, yeah.
Friday is the Hall of Fame. Friday would work if they did like an early show like they do, and then have that kind of lead into the UFC Hall of Fame. That would be something. Even 4th of July, doing something maybe midday kind of on the 4th, having it end around a little bit before. Well, the fireworks in East Coast would obviously be an issue, but as far as the West Coast or in Vegas, having it end maybe around 7:30. So fans could still go to that and then get out to the fireworks show if they're interested in that. But I don't know. I was just curious. I saw this. I haven't been able to find any other information on that, so I was curious. But that would definitely add some flavor because it doesn't really seem like much of an international fight week really when there's one night of combat scheduled right now. That's pretty much all I got, Ed. You got anything else?
No, we talked about the Rochester. I mentioned the other two fights that piqued my interest. That's ESPN Plus. Yeah, I mean, I think that's it for me. Was there something? There's a CFFC on Saturday around here. I don't know if there's anything local going on by you. I think there's the LFA 66. We had Natan's on 69, right?
Yeah, I believe there's another LFA card this weekend. I haven't looked at the entire schedule. PFL obviously had a show earlier last week. We didn't get a chance to talk about, but I think their next show's on the 23rd.
Yeah.
We'll talk more about that as kind of the brackets start going and we get into the playoff season there.
Yeah. Maybe when they come to Atlantic City and I get to them, we can talk more about them.
There you go. So until then, fans can follow us at Combat Hour on Twitter. You can catch me at MMA Hawk 21 on Twitter and Instagram. You can follow Ed at Carbazol on Twitter and at Carbeerzol on Instagram. Well, looks like we'll focus on UFC this weekend, Ed. So look forward to talking to you about these fights and figuring out a way for you to watch them.
All right, man. I'll talk to you next week.
Take it easy.